if I were you, I would be afraid
Yeah.
that Scientology would contact your employers.
They didn't tell you that they were Scientologists at the time. It's just we knew that it was weird and strange and wasn't something that was talked about a whole lot.
Like, the only way they let that guy leave the Narconon, the fact that it was serious enough that it required an ambulance, is the only reason it got done. Okay, we're good.
How's it going, man?
Let's do this. Thank you for helping me to inaugurate SPTV Studios.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doing a double header here. All right, so hey, how long ago did we meet?
God, it's been since I think February now, somewhere around there, January, February, I think at this point.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I think when Reese came to town, so I'd been watching for a few years when I was up in New Hampshire, kind of doing a snowbird thing back and forth during the pandemic, and started watching the community online as it really developed, and mainly it was just your channel for a while, yours and what Mark Bunker had posted for a really long time, and just kind of thinking about how it was when I grew up, having been born and raised here, and really thinking about when I moved down there, I'm gonna be a part of that community. I'm gonna meet these people at some point. This is before like even all the protesting had really started. I saw that we kind of had like the same personality, laughed at the same shit. The Tom Segura, had very similar. Then the protests, kind of started. And that was, pretty close to when we were getting ready to move down here for good. And I think my turning point, which I've said in a few other videos, was when Confident Chris had got attacked. And that for me was kind of a big deal. I'd seen people start going out in Clearwater. And I was like, I live just a few minutes away. I was born and raised in Clearwater, and I live in a little town just north in Palm Harbor. It's like 15 minutes to get downtown. And when I saw that Reese was coming into town, I was like, this is a perfect time where maybe it'll be a little bit less awkward. There's people that they don't know coming anyways. So this will be my opportunity. I already had a bunch of, gimbals and camera gear from my work. Decided to put that stuff together and make my way down. I don't know if you came out the first day, but I think it was the second day. And we met each other. The Coffee Gate happened where you were out for a week.
Was that really the first time we met?
Yeah, I think that was the first time.
But it wasn't the first time you'd been protesting.
No.
That's right, because George had texted me a bunch of times saying, hey, me and Kai, I think there was even one time, me, Kai, and Steph are down at Charlie's Sushi, and I'm thinking, who's Kai and Steph?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, I had met you like briefly one day, and I continued going out and, made good friends with George kind of during that process. I think my very first night out there, I had got to know, Farrell Cheryl and Lori Plays. And, that was back when it was like, hey, make sure, well, still is, but back when it was really like, make sure everybody gets back to their car, make sure everybody gets home safely. They drove me back to my car, some big dude that they'd never even met. And I hop it into Farrell Cheryl's car, listening to, all this stuff that had been happening. And, they take me back and I hop in my car, like, dang, this is pretty cool. That actually went pretty well, and I just kind of continued going. And I think after I went a few times, I met George a few more times, and I was like, hey, what's the deal with like exchanging phone numbers here? I still had kind of like the anti-protest fear that my parents had been building into me since I was born down here. Like, hey, you gotta be really careful, talking about Scientology stuff. Are you really gonna put that on the internet? And so I was like, hey, should I give these people my actual name and my actual phone number? And George was like, hey, yeah, that's cool. We can do that. And we became friends. I think a few weeks later, I sent you an email saying, hey, I'm that guy that you met that one time at that Starbucks with Reese. And you said, call or text me anytime. So I did. And, we kind of quickly became friends.
Wow. Okay. Somehow I did not know that you started watching a few years ago when you were still living up in the Northeast.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did that happen?
I think that the original part of it was I was kind of into the whole cult verse during the pandemic, working from home, kind of watching on the Mormon side with like Mormon Stories, Dr. John DeLynn, Cults to Consciousness with Shalise. And, eventually one of your videos got recommended and I was like, oh, if I thought the other stuff was my bag, well, this is definitely my bag. Because I grew up, all around it, going to school with people that were Scientologists, dated Scientologists in the past. Remember them being, when they were in the Countryside Mall, doing a personality test. And I guess just all started like pouring in. And I was like, this is the one that I need to be watching. And I kind of very heavily zeroed in and kind of watched over the last, gosh, it's been like 5 years now that I've been watching your channel. So
wow.
It was really kind of cool that, I had this like weird little parasocial thing that I was like, didn't know how it was going to be if like we actually ever did meet, or if I ever did go out and meet any protesters when that started. But it actually turned out to be really cool. So I'm glad that I did.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, when you're talking with George, I always think of George as being the Clearwater guy, but he's actually spent the first, 20 years of his life, at least in Chicago. Are you born and raised in Clearwater?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Clearwater. I was born in the tail end of the 80s, 88. And my parents came here in 73. So I think just a few years before they took over the Fort Harrison. And my dad and my uncle, they both, had kind of, interactions with Scientology growing up, and would tell me stories about it growing up, about how they first, had like armed guards, and then they were like guards with clubs once the armed guard thing was kind of an issue. And so I used to hear all types of stories about that as I was growing up. But yeah, I'm born and raised. I was born in actually Orlando, moved to Clearwater as an infant, and I've lived kind of all around this, Pinellas County area ever since. A short stint in Miami and a short stint in New Hampshire, but for the most part, better part of 40 years have been spent here in Pinellas County. So
you didn't go to Clearwater High, did you?
I didn't go to Clearwater High. I went to Countryside High.
Okay.
My aunt and uncle did go to Clearwater High during the years that whoever was in the Sea Org that would have gone there during that time would have been those years.
Shelley Miscavige went to Clearwater High.
Yeah.
Mark Yeager went to Clearwater High, and I feel like I'm missing one.
I haven't heard too many stories directly from my aunt and uncle, but about any happenings in the actual high school, but they knew that they were there and thought that it was kind of weird. The
Scientologists were there.
Yeah.
Did they know they were these like teenage Sea Org executives?
The only interactions that I had ever heard of was that it seemed like they were very adult for the time that was going on. My family's like big into like the local music scene, the art scene, and that like wasn't really the bag of those kids that were there.
Yeah.
And that seemed to even be the case with many years later with me going to school and meeting friends that were Scientologists. It wasn't always their bag either.
Yeah.
Even if they were public, they always kind of had other stuff going on.
I think it just dawned on me what like the pinnacle of this podcast would be finding a local who remembers going to school with Shelley Miscavige. Yes.
I could probably find it, to be honest. I know that my aunt and uncle both graduated, I think, in the 70s and maybe early 80s at Clearwater High. So,
Wow.
I get a lot of like the stories that I've got from them, when I was growing up, before I kind of had a few of my own. And I know that there's like one in particular that they used to tell me about. A good friend of our family has a local business in town, and prior to that, he had a club down on Cleveland Street. And it was kind of always described to me that, Cleveland Street, kind of in the heart of Clearwater's downtown area, was kind of like this budding area of artists and galleries where, they could have like their paintings hosted and this kind of, stuff going on down there. And that kind of existed for a little bit into, Scientology coming into town, but slowly it started being pushed away, and it was no longer this like artsy little, walkable end of the downtown.
Oh, check it out. Watch this. Right now, the door is open, and the all welcome sign isn't out yet, but let's see what happens. This is the Clearwater Bank building. This house is the Office of Special Affairs, and it's where they have what they call the Welcome Center. What's that? I'm outside, ma'am. Yeah, it's a Clearwater Bank building, but it's a historical building. We got a security guard. Good morning, sir.
Morning. Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And one of our family friends, had a gallery that became a club there. And the club was like an after-hours club, and they used to leverage one of these, city lots to park in. And, they didn't really have their own. A lot of buildings down there don't have their own, and they got permission from the city to use it. Well, I guess Scientology wanted the building that his club was in, and he wasn't going to sell. And the way that they ended up forcing him to shut down and sell was they got the city to sell them the lot that he was using for parking, so then he no longer was able to have any business. So he fought it for a while. They ended up getting the lot and shut down and pushed him out. And he's someone I've been trying to get to come tell that story for a while, but he's still old mindset, not ready yet.
That's the other point of this podcast, especially because we're so local. Like
Yeah.
in person, it's local. You know, on my channel, it's international. I talk
Mm-hmm.
to anyone, anywhere. But this is going to be local stuff. We gotta educate the locals. There's nothing to be afraid of.
That's exactly right. And that's something that I'm constantly, like even, telling my parents and my cousins and stuff who watch, the few videos that I've made out there and then your guys' videos subsequently. And they're kind of like, oh, yeah. Everybody's still like, even like, I'm like, look, it's okay. If they acted the way they did back then, the exposure is so high now that it wouldn't exist for very long. Doesn't mean there won't be like some nefarious stuff, like whether it's a nail in a tire, like people have got, or a car keyed, or, something like that. But it's not the same as it used to be, and there's no reason that people can't come to downtown. We've gone downtown a bunch of times. There's nobody there. That's the only thing that there is to worry about, is there's nobody there. So bring as many friends as you want. You literally bring as many people as you want. You don't have to worry about the bar being too full and not getting in, so.
Well, I'll tell you what, during the pandemic, the city of Clearwater made a decision to take a couple of those downtown blocks and basically turn them into walking streets. Like there's no through traffic there.
Right.
So Clearwater is so dead. At any night of the week, bring a party of 20, 30, 40 people downtown. Go to Nash Keys in downtown Clearwater.
That's right.
You got the whole street to yourselves. You got a whole street party, no permit required.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think it'll take a while for people to, that paradigm to shift. And I think that it will, the more that the channels, expand, the more protesters that go out and the more that awareness is raised. And, I do think that there is a farther reach in the YouTube media space than there is in the mainstream media space. But I do think that if the mainstream media would have the stones to put some of this content that's already put together out there, that would make such a huge difference for people who are on the outskirts that may never find us on YouTube. Or if they do, they're not going to stay watching, as much as they could. So it's, something that I think will happen. It's just taking a little bit longer than we'd hoped for.
Yeah. Okay, so growing up in Clearwater, did you say you've even dated a Scientologist or two?
I did at one time. I'll share names afterwards, but,
Or maybe just first names.
Yeah, Katie.
Okay.
So we'll go with Katie. And there was a particular occasion that I didn't know involvement in Scientology for a very long time, and this was someone who was, I guess, more of an acquaintance, really, I should say. And we used to go to downtown Dunedin a long time, which you all have heard, Clearwater George talk about on his channel, and even seen the contrast between it. And the short version of that is it's just a few miles away, and it's got 45 restaurants with hundreds of people that come out on the weekend, and that used to be our place to go when we first became of drinking age. And we were all out there one night, and she was there at the bar crying, and I guess as it turned out, her brother had just joined the Sea Org. And this is one of the first times that I had kind of heard, like, they had been bandied about, like, hey, don't say Scientist stuff around her or whatever, her parents, this and that. And we were all respectful of that. I didn't know that she really had any involvement in it to that extent, but come to find out that her brother was joining the Sea Org. And I didn't really think people did that anymore. I knew that I'd seen young people there, when I was downtown sometimes, but I was like, who would do that anymore? Who's not seen South Park? And this is years before SPTV channels even existed. I mean, I'm going back 15 years at this point, So, yeah, maybe.
Was that
maybe
South
more.
Park episode more than 15 years ago?
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. So I was like, who hasn't seen it yet at this point?
Old. Well, I'm old. You're not old. Are you only 35?
Yeah.
You're 34?
35. I'll be 36 this year.
Jeez
Yeah.
Louise, the kids.
Oh, that's the kids these days. Yeah.
Okay,
No.
so you're like, who joins the Sea Org anymore? That's
Yeah,
amazing.
well, I mean, even at that time, I was in my early 20s. Even though I'm only 36, I'm closer to 40 than 30 at this point. So I've been around it long enough to form an opinion. But back then, I was like, who would do that? Like, who believes in aliens?
You're like,
Xenu?
a billion years?
Yeah, I mean, and at that time, I'm actually a high school dropout. I did end up going to college, and it's probably something we can get into a little bit later. One of the reasons I wanted to make my channel, but at that time I was like, partying, living it up. Like, I was like, who would do that? Who's going to give up what we're doing right now to go do that? And then when I saw that she was going through, having a family member do that, I was like, holy crap, this is still a thing even back then. And probably didn't really have much thought of it after that until more recently when I realized I thought back to then, it's how was happening then 15 years ago is still happening now. It's got to still be happening. I mean, these were kids that were my age that were joining at that time.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know I've seen some of the people or certain individuals like trolling about, oh, there really still kids out there. Well, if you were joining at 20 and I'm not yet 40, you know, or any time in and around that, that's young to be giving up the rest of your life, you know? Yeah. And kind of brings me to one of the points that, you know, I thought about when creating my channel. You know, I'm in the IT space. I have been for a long time. I was in healthcare before that. And I thought about when I was creating my channel, you know, what's one way that I could help? And haven't got to making all of the content that I wanted to yet, but I thought about IT career pathing or career pathing in general for people coming out of the cult, you know, and I hear all the stories of people that were either in the Sea Org or hardcore dedicated public, maybe had a compromised education, no education, or any professional training at all other than what they've experienced in the Sea Org. Could make it a little bit more difficult to get a job when you come out, to find your way into college if you wanted to go to college, to find your way to getting a GED or a high school diploma if that's what you wanted. But if you didn't want to do that, well, what I've come to find out in the IT industry is you don't necessarily have to. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, a very certification-based, self-study, you know, based track if you want it to be. And I think that it's one of these untapped areas for people that are coming out that are in that particular situation that, you know, should really be explored, you know. Specifically for me, I'm on a even more particular side of it that I think is untapped called pre-sales, which is, you know, being able to sell and be technical at the same time. And I'm in the Cisco space, and passing Cisco certifications is, you know, one of the ways that I've been able to, you know, make my way in the world. And I think that it's really a no ceiling type of industry that can go wherever you want it to go. As technical and don't talk to me, I'm down in the trenches working on the IT gear as you want, or I want to be able to put on a suit and go speak to the C-suite and to the engineers, you know, and make the sale at the end of the day like I do, you know. So I think that there's a whole space there that, you know, could be explored for people coming out. So it's one of the things that I wanted to make my channel a little bit more about. It's where the name comes from, Spit Clearwater. I go by Spit Clearwater or Kai, you know, on the channel is my particular nomenclature, but really its intention did start to be broken out to
SPIT, right?
Yeah, SPIT, Suppressive Person Information Technology.
Yes. And,
you know, I kind of did it as the double, triple entendre, whatever it is. And, you know, spit sticks. Yeah. So I just kind of stuck with that. And, you know,
that's why whenever I say your screen name, it's going to be SPIT.
Yeah.
But I know no one would actually assume that that's how it's pronounced.
Right. That's the whole little dirty double entendre of it.
I have to ask you, what if I were you? I would be afraid.
Yeah,
that Scientology would contact, because you know that Scientology would contact your employers and be like, "Look at this religious bigot harassing these Scientologists."
Yeah.
Have you had anything happen?
I have had nothing happen. I have had a conversation with my boss about what I do. That way, you know, at least my first line of defense is there. Good. I was a little bit worried about talking about that at work at all at first because, you know, at the particular company that I'm at, there's a lot of employees and there's bound to be Scientologists that work for my company. So once I felt out the situation a little bit and decided that I'd put my content, you know, out there, I did have a conversation with my boss. I've even discussed with him, you know, we get awarded a certain amount of time that we can use to support causes and charities and things of that nature each year. A lot of times that stuff gets publicized. So not that I do any work specifically for SPTV Foundation, but if there was ever any career path or anything, I have asked, like, hey, can I use that time for that? How would it be publicized? And he's like, well, if that ever happens, we'll cross that bridge. But he's like, you know, you have my support. I commend you for what you're doing. It probably is a good idea to know your audience if you do choose to talk about it at work. Great place to start would be, you know, when we have our, you know, biannual like get together, because we're all you know, around the world is where my team is. We're all remote, but you know, I brought it up and I'm not really afraid. You know, as much as I would be worried that something like that would happen and I wouldn't want to have to deal with it, I think that it would be something that would be overcome pretty easily.
That is awesome. In fact, there's a huge lesson to be learned there, because one of the people the SPTV Foundation is helping right now is a guy who, former Scientologist, has done a bunch of videos exposing ways in which, from firsthand knowledge that he has, Scientology has covered up and protected pedophiles. And Scientology used his videos to get him fired from his job. The lesson I think that I want to take this opportunity to encourage people to take away from that is talk to your employer.
Yeah.
Tell them ahead of time.
Don't let it
hey,
be a
look,
surprise.
I got this activism I do. I'm exposing Scientology fraud and abuse, and please don't be surprised if you get a phone call from someone saying some crazy stuff. And that's the best thing you can. I'm so glad you did that.
Yeah, I had to. I wouldn't have felt comfortable like always wondering if he got that call and hadn't spoke to me first. At least now there'll be like some type of disarmed approach that he could take if HR were to call him. I do worry about it even like at my son's school. I don't really put him on camera a whole lot. I mean, you've met him, George has met him, Jenna, our families have met each other. But outside of that, I'm always very cautious of someone showing up at his school or something like that. But I just have a really hard time believing that they would, do that anymore. It's a really bad look at this point,
It is.
But, in the event that it does, I'm open with my kid. He watches my videos. He knows the story. I think even before we came over here the first time when he was, going to meet you, I was just like, hey, someone asks you what you know about Scientology, what would you say? And he was just like, well, I know that it's a cult, not a religion that breaks up families. And I'm like, pretty good answer, That's a solid foundation there. And of course he knows, I've told him some of the more wacky stories, the space opera type stuff. And he thinks that's really funny too. But I had that talk with him. Just God forbid anything ever did land on his doorstep at school. So put little safeguards in place that made me feel more comfortable with things, even if those things would never happen. I just felt like it was something that was worth doing.
No, it's great. It's great. And your boy's 12, right?
Yeah.
He's 12 and he knows Scientology's a cult, not a religion, and it just tears apart families.
That's right. That's right.
That's incredible.
But
my girls go to well, they all go to public school.
Yeah.
And charter schools, a mixture of charter school. Well, charter schools are public schools, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And there's always a very real possibility that the friends that they're making are kids of Scientologists, and they've got it on their radar. They're like, Dad. There was my middle child was going over to a friend's house, and I was driving her there, and I'm like, this is the presidential district of Clearwater. This is like 90% Scientologists, and I was like, is this girl a Scientologist? And she goes, I think so. I said, are you shitting me? And it turns out she's not. But I'm like, I'm dropping my girl off at a possible Scientologist house.
It's wild. I think that my son had told me a story that even in one of his classes, I don't know if it's a history or a world religion class, whatever version of that you have in, middle school, he had brought up, like, are you going to talk about Scientology? Because he knows, like our community that we're in. And the teacher had, kind of pulled him aside and said, no, because there's some Scientologists in the classroom. And she wasn't going to, bring that up because she didn't want anybody to get offended. Yeah. And I was like, but if it's a real religion, you think that they'd be able to bring it up, right? But obviously, that's the common opinion of those around here. It is taboo, and they wouldn't talk about it in the classroom. So that was pretty interesting and pretty telling,
Wow.
Yeah. You couldn't wait to come home and tell me that.
It's funny, my kids, and now that you're doing your channel, and hopefully I can help you blow that up now that we're going to be doing a ton of podcasts and stuff.
Yeah.
My kids' friends love the channels.
Oh, I bet.
They're like, they call me, my oldest daughter's name, her name's Beckett. They call me Beckett's dad. Hi, Beckett's dad. They don't call me Aaron. They don't call me Mr. Asmithlevin. They don't call me Mr. Aaron. Hi, Beckett's dad.
Yep.
And they're like, how the subscribers doing, Beckett's dad?
How's business?
They love it.
Yeah, no,
they come over here. They want to touch the play button. They absolutely love it. So just wait till your kids are like, hey, we're watching the video.
No, I know. Well, he wants to start. His big thing is like he's in a Rubik's Cube competitions, and I posted about that a few times. And we're throwing back and forth the idea of letting him start a channel. So probably happen at some point sooner than later. I better start it while I can still give a little bit of guidance, and there's some semblance of control before he's totally off the rails. But yeah, it's definitely a cool thing to be a part of and have the kids, be excited about, So it's kind of interesting how it, comes full circle like that.
Yeah. Okay, so growing up in Clearwater, what was your and your friends, all your contemporaries, the perception of Scientology?
That it was weird. I think if I had to, give like a singular word to it, that we knew that it was weird and strange, and we didn't have, when I was very young, wasn't something that was talked about a whole lot. Probably by the time we got to middle school, we knew what it was. We knew, what the Fort Harrison was, and that was like Scientology town. My pediatrician that I grew up was down on Myrtle Avenue, and used to see it, from that point, and that's where the stories kind of started. And amongst our friends, it wasn't probably until high school that there was a lot of talking about it, where there'd be certain people that we knew were Scientologists.
Did you guys have a name for them?
Scientos.
The Scientos?
Yeah, we used to say Sciento. Yeah.
Scientos. I've heard
Sinos.
Ronbots. Sinos.
Yeah.
Oops. Yeah. Sinos probably.
I'm probably confusing that with Sciento just because that's so recent, but it was really with Sinos.
Sinos.
Yeah, it was the Sinos.
It sounds like such a slur.
Yeah, I really didn't think it was, but at the time, because I just didn't, I didn't know if it would be offensive if they even heard it. We weren't, using that around anybody that we thought was a Scientologist. It's just that's what we used kind of internally. But we knew that there were a few people that were in our group. They were all public, obviously, that we knew, and actually grew up across the street from someone who, his mother was on staff and his grandmother was in Sea Org, and didn't know that he was, Scientologist for a very long time. Actually, that kind of like wraps it up into another weird little story. I'll make my way back to the childhood perception or the teenage perception, but this person I grew up across the street from didn't come out until much later. I guess it was high school, so it ties in that he was a Scientologist, and this was kind of shortly after a few years after the South Park episode kind of came out, and kind of got a little bit more information on what Scientologists really believe. And at that time, not understanding that most Scientologists that hadn't gotten to OT3 didn't really know what that stuff was, but that in our minds, that's what they all believed. So after that, it had made a huge transition. And when I found out that my friend, we'll call him Alex, was a Scientologist, he started trying to explain to me that, oh, no, that's not true. He thought that was just a cartoon. He had no idea. But he started trying to explain to me, like how the e-meter and stuff worked. And around this time, there was a kiosk for Scientology in the Countryside Mall. And they used to have Sea Org members go to the mall and walk around and ask if you wanted to take the personality test. They didn't tell you that they were Scientologists at the time. It was just a personality test. And I think at the time that I probably took it, I think I was 14, had blue hair and was like playing in a punk band. And I decided to go do it. And I think they were even giving like money for it at some point. Or told us that there was some tickets or something that we would get when we went. And I went, and it was in the mall, and I think it was in, I don't know if Carlisle Marketing was a Scientologist, but it was in this Carlisle Marketing room that was in the bottom floor of the Countryside Mall, tucked away in the corner. And I went in there and started taking this test. I'm not sure I even finished it, because it was way longer than I expected it was going to be for whatever it was. I ended up leaving and saw that they were by the little kiosk in the mall with the Dianetics books. I was like, oh, that's what this shit is. I thought that they were maybe trying to get them to do the test. And I was like, this is way too long. And I was a much different Kai back then. And I kind of gave them the paper back in a not as nice way and left. But I was with the kid that I had grown up across the street from that day. And I think he had kind of brought me there for that situation to really happen. Well, cut forward to being a young adult. Before I was in IT, I was in nursing, and I worked with a detox, a real inpatient detox. And in comes Alex from Narconon.
Oh, wow.
He had an issue with drugs at the time. A lot of people did back then, kind of Florida pill mill era. And he had gotten really sick while he was there. And I guess, I don't know if it was his mother or a paramedic or someone got called, and he ended up getting brought to us. And he was so dehydrated. I mean, cold turkey is like, I think I've heard you say it on a video before, cold turkey withdrawal is not illegal, but it's not pretty. And you can die from cold turkey withdrawal on certain things, benzos and opiates and alcohol. The withdrawals, the DTs can be really, really bad. When he came in, his kid was like already a skinny guy. He looked so emaciated and just so gaunt that he ended up getting getting treatment for it. I won't, go too specific in case anybody knows who he is. But if he's out there watching, email me, spitclearwater@gmail.com or kai@spitclearwater.com. Love to hear from him. But that was him, and then I had one other patient about 6 months later that came in with the same thing from Narconon here in Clearwater.
So he was a Scientologist who had become addicted.
Yeah.
And basically washed out of the Narconon program. Like Narconon had to be like, oh shit, we can't handle this guy. Send him to a real medical detox.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And I don't know that if it was Narconon that sent him or how he came in an ambulance. So
I bet
he
it
got
was Narconon.
It could be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Scientologists will always go to Narconon as the first line of defense on rehab.
Right.
But they do cold turkey withdrawal.
Right.
They can't do medical withdrawal.
Yeah, the facility that we were at, it was an inpatient facility in Tampa Bay that had, medically supervised withdrawal, medically assisted withdrawal treatment. So like weaning off using substitutions, like so that you could minimize withdrawal symptoms. It was the proper way to do things, in my opinion. Everybody's got their own opinion on those stuff, but I think if you're going to be successful, having doctors and psychologists and a group and something around you to be successful in the recovery community or your own community afterwards, and abstain from drugs and not get so sick that you want to go right back, or hate the people around you because they're making you be in a sauna, whatever the circumstance was there. It wasn't working, and he was really sick, and that happened twice in the 18 months that I was involved with that place.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, unless it got serious enough, like the only way they let that guy leave the Narconon.
I don't think you could keep fluids down, and they were still putting him in the sauna.
That's what I mean. Like the fact that it was serious enough that it required an ambulance is the only reason it got done.
Probably. Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. Because if there was any other way, it would happen more often.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, that program, I don't understand how they were able to afford it. His parents were separated. His father was not a Scientologist. He actually worked at a prominent hydroponics shop in the area, and that's probably how he was exposed to other things that led to other things. I don't know, but I think that that program, from my understanding, was like $30K back then.
Yeah.
So I don't know how the heck they were able to afford it with his mother on staff, grandmother Sea Org, and his dad. And maybe he had some other funds, but I don't think he would have sent him there. However it shook out, he was there. The program that I was at was not that expensive, and we were like a real medical facility.
Wow.
So it was kind of wild to see.
Even Scientologists who are involved in the Narconon space have realized there's extra money to be made in the medical detox space. Yeah. So like before I got declared an SP, I was working for Kurt Feshbach. Kurt Feshbach created the what is now the Narconon Suncoast, the local Narconon.
Right.
And he also owned Novus Medical Detox, which was a Scientologist-run facility, but it was a pure medical detox facility, which basically means they can use, is it methadone? Like what?
Well, you can use, I mean, what we use in the detox that I was in was buprenorphine, which is the main chemical in drugs like Suboxone or Subutex, which are typically taken orally. We administer it through a shot. And it's a substitution therapy, just like methadone, but doesn't require you to go to a clinic. That's the only way to get methadone prescribed is to go to a designated clinic. It's very highly controlled. The other one that we used, you could leave with a prescription for it and go to a doctor afterwards and continue outpatient therapy. But yeah, you don't get anything like that in Narconon. But yeah, like at a Novus, it would probably be something like a buprenorphine therapy. Yeah.
So it was a little bit of an embarrassment when the OT8 Scientologist executive director of Novus Medical Detox was pulled over for a DUI driving the company car.
Oh my God. Isn't that wild? That's absolutely wild. And you said it's called Novus, right?
Novus Medical Detox.
Is that an homage to becoming Homo Novus? Is that
That's actually that hadn't even occurred to me.
Isn't that what you're supposed to become when you
to
go
me.
clear? It becomes Homo Novus.
You just fed me a cognition. I'll drink to that. Cheers. So we were talking about Scientology's reputation. Is that what we were talking about?
Yeah, I think it was kind of like what were my friends, what was the way we perceived, Scientology and Scientologists in my group. I think, like I said, a big turning point, which a lot of people mentioned, was the South Park episode and, the little things that we had in town. The kiosk at the mall kind of came and went. I think they stopped taking Sea Org members to the mall. I think they kind of started asking them not to come.
They're like, the Sea Org members keep blowing. Can you stop taking them to the
I would
goddamn
imagine,
mall?
now, knowing what I know now, I would think it was a huge risk what they were doing because they were walking around and they were young when they were there. I remember thinking that they couldn't have been much older than I was. And I think that was the appeal, was that it was like usually there was 2 or 3. Usually they had someone at the kiosk, and it was all Dianetics books and like an e-meter at the kiosk. And then they would have 2 people, a boy and a girl, going back and forth in the mall. And they were, like I said, they didn't seem much older than I was, and outside of but that kind of came and went. And like I said, as I got deeper into high school and started meeting some friends that I knew were Scientologists, they didn't really ever talk to any of it about us or any about it to us at all. We knew that I don't know what the confusion was back then. Now, knowing what like a touch assist is and stuff, there was always this joke that Scientologist kids that gave massages. I swear to God, this was like a thing, and I never had any like idea what the joke was. Now hearing about how there's touch assist,
The
and
nervous
massage tables,
assist
or nervous
is the
assist.
massage.
Okay.
The touch assist could never be confused
Yeah,
with
feel
a
my
massage.
finger. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I would have known the difference either back then. That's a good clarification, but that was a running joke that there was, is like, oh, you're gonna go do their weird massages, and I was like, what the heck are you guys talking about? I'm like, is this massage parlor shit? Like, but now it's like everything starts to become a little bit more exposed, as time goes on and information's become more public, and now we can kind of learn everything. But I still know a few people who are in that I haven't had contact with for a long time. They never really talked to me about being a Scientologist when we were younger. I know they did to some of my other friends that I think maybe they thought maybe they would have been able to get to go to course with them because they'd have a buddy, but that never really happened for me in particularly. I don't think it would have been well received.
You know what I think is cool is that because some of these younger Scientologists know people like you, and you've got a channel, and because everyone's kind of connected by 1 or 2 degrees of separation.
It's wild.
If those people who knew you leave Scientology, you're going to be the most likely one to find out about that.
Yeah.
Because people are going to see you on YouTube, and they're going to be like, oh, hey, they might see you on YouTube and be
That's
like,
right.
hey, I remember that guy.
That's
I can't
right.
believe he's got a channel. I'll tell him my story.
Yeah. No, I think that would be totally cool. And I think about that all the time, that, if all the people that through the years that I've looked up to see, like, hey, I wonder what they're doing now, like when Facebook became a thing, or Instagram, whatever, social media platform, just to see what someone's doing. And I think that's one of the other reasons that I wanted to at least have some type of content out there and get the channel started, even if I didn't get the full, breadth of workout that I wanted to up front. At least if someone could find me, I'd know where to point them. It brings me to another little story. I think I told you guys about this when a couple weeks ago when I went to the barber, and it was right before the meetup. Me and Kylo, my son, were going to get cleaned up at the barber shop right before the meetup that we had when everybody was in town a couple weeks ago. And I had kind of let them know that, hey, we're doing this meetup, whatever. They're asking about my son's Rubik's Cube competition, and asking what, I was doing, that evening, that's why he was getting cleaned up. Why am I getting cleaned up? Because it was like in between our normal appointment. And I was like, well, if I'm gonna be on everybody's camera, at least I'm gonna, get the beard and hair done. And I told him, hey, I do this thing on YouTube, and I was like, I don't really talk about it all the time out in public because I never know, like if I'm out of business like that, which it turned out to be the case. I let them know what the meetup was for and what I was doing and about my YouTube channel. And the owner came out and he looked around and he's like, I have a lot of clients that are Scientologists. And he's like, I'm so glad that you waited to bring it up. But he's like, I'm effing I want to hear everything, So I started explaining to him about the channels that were out there and, who was going to be in town. And he started rattling off all these stories about all his customers that are Scientologists that try to get them to use like business services or whatever it is. And he mentioned that there was a couple people that he knows that have left and are now part of his church. He's in a Christian church.
Really?
Yeah. And he said that there's 2 parents that he knows that used to all come, or the father and son used to come. And I guess the son joined the Sea Org, and he didn't really understand what it was until he started doing his own research. Because he said all of a sudden, I don't know what the circumstances exactly were, because he didn't know to tell me, but he would come as a Sea Org member. He said all of a sudden one day he came as a Sea Org member in a van, and his dad came, and like they still got their haircut together, but that he came in the van and 2 Sea Org members like waited outside.
Oh my God.
While he was getting his haircut, and that he would leave. And then the dad would like say like, if he ever says anything, please, if you can talk to him for me, kind of thing. Like, I guess he disconnected from his parents because they were kind of on the outs with the church, was the story that I heard. And they had no idea, and they were blindsided when he said he wanted to join the Sea Org. And I guess he disconnected from them if they were no longer going to be active participants in the church. But he was still able to somehow get their haircuts together.
Wow.
Yeah. And he did ask me to like not bring it up every time when I'm in there, because I never know who's going to be in there, and that they do give him a lot of business.
And so the parents of that kid are now a member of this Christian church?
That was another family.
Oh, different.
Like, different one.
Man.
Yeah.
Okay, so any of you local Scientologists or former Scientologists out there, you want to tell your story, this is where you do it.
That's right. That's right.
Growing up in Scientology, gmail.com.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay, so what was, I know you mentioned, I was going to ask you what made you start doing the protesting downtown. You mentioned the Confident Chris thing. Is that really what made you?
Yeah, that was like my turning point, to actually like going downtown, because I'd seen Lori Plays and Farrell Show down there, and like you had been down there before, but they were going out a lot. They still go out there a lot. Mm-hmm. And when I saw him get attacked, I never thought that would like be a thing that would happen, not in the way that it did. And I was like, something like that, I feel like could happen now that I've seen it, literally live. And I decided that I was going to go down and meet them, and I did. And I guess I shouldn't be so bold, but I'm not a small guy. I'm a big guy, so I figured, well, at least if I go down there, maybe there'll be some chance that something were to happen. Where at least there's power in numbers, and it's not just a couple ladies down there. Not that they can't take care of themselves, but that was something I thought about and decided to go down. And was going down quite a bit at first. My work kind of comes in waves depending on the fiscal years of the companies I support, and I was in a little bit of a lull, so I was going down there a lot, and that's like I said, just kind of blossomed from there into just protesting, into actual friendships with people in and outside of the community. And I think that's one of the things that I've mentioned it before, that forging friendships in the face of disconnection, and letting people know that haven't left yet, that are watching, that there is a community that's out there for you to be integrated into. There's so many of us, there's so many personalities in so many areas now that it's a real shame to lose things, but there's a whole lot to be gained, and you'll have a community to integrate into right away. There's those of us out there that, foundations that can help with expenses and transition and really getting established outside, people to come to with all types of advice and, different areas. If you want to live and move anywhere, you ever thought about living in Austin? You ever thought about living in Clearwater? There's a built-in community for them there. And that's been true for me, and I'm a never in, I was able to, integrate into a cool community down here that, really proud to be a part of. So it's really cool.
Awesome. Were you surprised when you actually started going downtown how the Scientology Sea Org members seem quite literally afraid to interact with anyone?
I was surprised. Even though I'd been watching some of the streams in LA, I still thought that maybe here, that, we'd have some type of interactions, just even if based off of Mark Bunker's videos from years ago and what I'd seen in the past. Like, they're outside, we're going to run into them. And we've had very few interactions total, if you think about it, other than us talking at, maybe some public or at some Sea Org members trying to go back into hiding, whether it's, via a bus or a building, back or a front door, escorted by security or not. They're trying to get away. And it was kind of surprising to me that even the public, nobody's mouthing off. Like, I thought for sure we'd have someone popping off at us. And we've had a few, but compared to the overall amount of times that people have been out, it's a very, very small percentage of people are willing to comment. When you started, in with the Danny Masterson questioning, and this is one thing that I ran by the guys at the barbershop when they talked about being a part of a Christian church. I was like, hey, if you guys had a guy at your church that had sexually assaulted members of your church and then was convicted of it and put in prison for life, would I be able to ask you if that guy was welcome back? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. Of course he wouldn't be. And I was like, well, that's one of the main questions that's been asked, downtown in Clearwater. And like nobody has answered it to this date. And they like blew them away that like, what are you talking about? A guy gets convicted for SA and people won't say that that's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, not only did it surprise me that Sea Org members wouldn't have anything to say to us. And, it makes me wonder. I thought for sure maybe someone would want to have their face exposed if they wanted to get out. And I feel like we haven't even seen a lot of that yet. And that just proves how indoctrinated and scared they are. But I thought for sure, if not that there'd be someone in the public that would, have words more frequently.
Yeah.
Because they're down there.
Yeah.
Those buildings aren't empty, the one at least where they're getting services. The hotel is not empty. They found ways to get around without having to come around us, but nobody's so bold as to come out. It's very strange.
It is.
To be so proud and to be so trained on, confronting and shattering suppression and to go through all of that indoctrination so that you're able to stand up to scrutiny and bull baiting and not even a dozen people have come out to, test their Tone 40 and tell me to go the fuck away. I mean, there's someone out there who has a Tone 40 license plate. We caught him coming out of his car and he's like, oh no, that's not mine. And I'm like, who are you with a Tone 40 license plate then? Where's your intention? You got zero? Like, it's wild.
I love it.
It's wild.
I love it. Well, that is awesome. Thank you for helping me to christen SPTV Studios.
Absolutely. More than happy to, man.
It's been fantastic. I'll drink to that.
Absolutely.